Welcome to episode 1 of Harvesting Maine, an interview series that takes you from tree to table, gate to plate, field to fork. This is your chance to interact with Maine's farmers, growers, and food producers. Today, we'll hear from a group of sugar makers in the peak harvest season. We're talking about Pure Maine maple syrup. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us. So we're going to start out by introducing our sugar makers. We have sugar makers from across the state. We have sugar makers in the southern part of Maine. We have sugar makers in the United States' most prolific county, Somerset County. And we also have sugar makers from down east Maine. So let's begin down east. We'll start with Louis and Andrea of Church's Sugar Shack. Go ahead, introduce yourselves, and tell us what you're up to today.
I'm Louis Church from Church's Sugar Shack, owner and operator, and we're making syrup.
Making syrup. And how many taps do you have?
Right now I have in roughly like 500, I guess, right now. Of course, we're still adding, but maybe we're too late.
It's enough to keep you going.
Yeah.
Great. And let's move over to the western side of the state where we can hear from Kurt and Marie. Kurt, let's start with you. Tell us what you've been up to today.
Oh, today we've been, like Louis said, adding taps. We're up around 5,300 taps now, and shooting for another 1,000, but we'll see if we get there since the sap is already flowing.
Sap is already flowing. We are in the midst of the sap harvest season. And what is unique about Somerset County? We'll get more to this later, but correct me if I'm wrong. I think you are in a very special place in maple syrup territory when it comes to the nation, correct?
Yes, that is correct. Somerset County is the largest maple producing county in the whole United States. So we beat any county in Vermont or New York, the two leading states for maple syrup production.
Excellent. And that means a lot of effort on your part. Your neighbor down the road, so to speak, Marie, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what you've been up to today.
Hi, I'm Marie Harnois, manager of Passamaquoddy Maple Syrup. We are collecting sap, adding more taps. Today, actually, I was bottling some specialty orders to be ready to ship to California.
So from one coast to the other coast,
yes.
Making sure Pure Maine maple syrup gets to customers. That's great. So maple harvesting, maple production, sap harvesting happens this time of year. In the southern part of the state, we have two sugar makers. Michael, go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us what's happening in your neck of the woods.
Well, we're quite a bit south of Kurt and Marie there. So we're literally about halfway through our season at this point. And so production's been underway for us for a few weeks now. So today we were gathering sap. It was actually a very good day. It just barely froze last night, and the temperatures got into the mid-40s today. So we had a very good day of sap production. The sugar house right now, we're boiling and making sap. And second shift, we'll be in to start shipping products in the next hour or so, and we'll ship out all the orders for today, and those will leave UPS tomorrow. So busy day in the sugar house for sure.
Busy day in the sugar house. How about you, Ben? Has it been a busy day in the sugar house for you?
Yes, and very wet too. We had some vacuum leaks up on the side of the hill, and most of the concentration was on trying to get those fixed. But by the grace of God, we got 28 inches of vacuum, better than last year. So I must have fixed what I had broken last year.
Well, congratulations. So I heard you say that you referred to inches of vacuum. And for many of us who aren't familiar with what that means in sap collection and maple production, go ahead and dig into that for us, Ben, and we'll have some others chime in too, because that will get to one of our biggest questions, I think, before our for our viewers. So what does that mean, inches of vacuum?
So we have the small hobbyist style vacuum pump. This is a sap guzzler, distributed by Goodrich Maple out of Cabot, Vermont. Basically, it's a small diaphragm pump and hooked up our pipeline. Maine pulls back on that pipe. It's not as depth or it's not as high tech other vacuums. The amount of money that we have and availability, getting power to run the vacuum. It makes more sense for us to have.
So it makes sense for you. So Ben, what you're saying is it makes sense for you to have a vacuum, even though you're not a larger scale producer necessarily. It's an efficiency for the operation.
Yeah, I think that I think if anybody's going to tap a fair amount of wood, for years we used to tap best, but now with technology, I think been able to gain quite a bit having that. It just so happened that this particular pump made it equitable for us. Took us about 3 years to pay for that. We've got 3 other pumps, another little every year. Another summer.
So not without effort, not without some input and expense. These are all businesses that each of you are running. Kurt and Marie, Louis and Andrea, Michael, do you we'll start with you, Kurt. Do you use a vacuum system for your operation?
Yes, we do.
And Marie, do you use a vacuum system for your operation?
Yes, we do. We use one in our main sugar house, and we also have one in our pump stations. And we try to keep the pressures, the leaks in check, the pressure's good, so that 1, we're not hurting our trees, 2, we're not losing sap, so that every drop really does count.
Very important. Michael, how about you? Do you use a vacuum system?
We certainly do. Yeah, most all sugar houses have a vacuum system at this point. I think it's safe to say. And Marie's right. It's a balance between not hurting the tree and getting sap out efficiently. That's the key.
And there might be some that don't. Certainly, it could be depending upon that cost benefit analysis for running your business. Louis and Andrea, do you use a vacuum system?
I do not. We're just tube and gravity and individual taps themselves. But in this next coming year, I plan to go to a vacuum system. So
it's on our sap bucket list.
It's on your sap bucket list. That makes sense. So on your sap bucket list, but so tell us a little bit more about what you do, Louis and Andrea. We've heard from our other producers, they're using a vacuum system to help with their larger operations, but what does it look like for you when you're collecting your sap to make syrup?
Well, I guess if you was here watching us collect, you'd see us kind of running through the woods, and we got the kids involved, and they're running through the woods, and we're dumping it in pails and bringing it back here to the sugar house manually. And but either way, with a vacuum system or the way I do it, I mean, they're both labor intensive regardless. I mean, it doesn't matter whether I walk for a pail or you have to go out, like Ben said, and he was repairing leaks today. So they're both labor intensive, I feel.
not without effort. I keep on coming back to that phrase. I think one piece of this food production and our food system that folks are wondering about, if they've ever toured a sugar house, and it can be a short amount of time this time of year. Kurt, you mentioned a question that you sometimes get is, does syrup come directly from the tree? And so we've been discussing this vacuum system or sap collection. So, that kind of begs the question, why are you collecting sap if syrup comes from the tree? But the real answer is what, Kurt?
So the real answer is we have to boil that sap down to make syrup. So normally, for most people, it's about a 50-to-1 ratio. So you need 50 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. So it's a lot of time, it's a lot of effort, it's a lot of boiling.
Pretty simple.
And yep.
Tell us more about what that boiling process looks like after you've collected the sap and not the syrup. What does it look like to get that syrup in production?
So for us, we run our sap through a reverse osmosis machine. And what that does for us is it takes 30 gallons of water out. Now, mind you, that's down that 50-to-1 ratio. So it's taking 30 gallons out. Now we only have to boil 20 gallons of concentrated sap. And so that saves us a lot of time and a lot of oil in our evaporator.
Now, you mentioned
and then it
reverse
goes in
osmosis. Oops, sorry. So continue. So you mentioned reverse osmosis, and then it goes to the evaporator. Yep, go ahead.
Yep. So then in the evaporator, it boils for a couple hours, and we usually get about 25 to 30 gallons of syrup an hour off our evaporator when we're really cooking.
And any others use a reverse osmosis system? Marie, might you?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
We run all our sap through the reverse osmosis. And for us, we can roll off about 80 gallons an hour with our evaporator. We have 2 9,000-gallon sap collection tanks that we use. And when they're both full, it's a good day. It's a fun day.
How long does it take to fill that collection tank?
Depending on the day. There's some days where it could be a matter of 6 to 7 hours. Other times it could be 4, 5, 6 days, depending on the weather, depending on the trees, depending on the wind. There's so many variables that go into whether or not the trees are going to run that you really pay close attention to your barometric pressures, your temperatures, your wind. And, you kind of go from there, and Mother Nature's going to do what she's going to do. You just roll with her.
So about how many days does it really take to, how long is your harvest season? How many days on average would you guess?
Altogether, we run around from the very beginning to the very end is anywhere from 4 to 6 weeks for us. Out of that 4 to 6 weeks, we could probably get 20 really good boils out of it.
That's tremendous. And I'm curious to know how that relates to our other sugar makers here. How about you, Michael? What's your average? Marie talked about her average. What's it look like for you from start to finish on that process?
In southern Maine, we typically are starting. Our average start date is February 26th, so that's quite a bit earlier than them. Our average end date is April 7th, so it's basically the same time period of 4 to 6 weeks. It's just roughly a month earlier than northern Maine. We frequently smile about that because really, southern Maine, time we're finishing, they're really getting going, and there's a little overlap. It's not a lot. There may be a week or two in the middle here, but and typically it's 15, 18, sometimes as much as 20 good boils, in the middle of that. So numbers about the same, just a whole lot earlier on the calendar. So
yeah.
It varies immensely each year too. I was looking at from last year. Last year, our first boil last year was March 14th. And
Oh, wow.
this year, even with a cold, February, we were still at it by, I don't remember the date this year, but it was 22nd, 23rd. So a little bit earlier than normal, but.
How do you know when you're ready? Are you just always in the ready position? Or you're like, oh, okay, the Super Bowl's done.
You try to be, but it's what the weather does. The weather tells you it's ready to give you sap, and you're either ready or not, but the weather is going to do what the weather does. And you try to be ready ahead of time, but there's always those leaks, that we've mentioned earlier, and there's always getting a few more taps in. And but we've found if we can be ready for that 3rd or 4th week in February in southern Maine, we're in good shape. That works for us.
Lewis,
I usually just drive around.
Oh, so Ben drives around.
I usually just drive around and see what everybody else is doing, and
your neighbors. Do you drive around too, Lewis and Andrea? Are you checking out what other producers are doing down east, or?
No, not really. There's a few small people around, but really I don't have anybody to consult with down here. I'm really kind of like the only foolish enough one to try this. We don't really have that great of conditions right in our area. It seems like our run time somewhere between 3 and 4 weeks. I mean, I have done 5 weeks before, but 3 to 4 weeks is what I have. And it's either too cold or it's too warm. And it's just mostly because of that ocean climate, I think.
Yeah, and for our listeners who are tuning in from outside Maine, we should take a moment to explain that Maine is a pretty big state. And when we say down east, Lewis and Andrea, they're in Columbia Falls, which is, it's really a place that has a rich agricultural heritage. I think often we might think of wild blueberries. And so you're really on the coast, as you mentioned. And then really opposite that, almost on the Canadian border, near Jackman is really where Kurt and Marie are in our most prolific county. And then sort of closer to the New Hampshire border, but also the southernmost point of Maine is where Michael and Ben are. So there's a lot to it. And we even have producers in other counties of the 16 counties. So just to help everyone tune in, if you're ever driving through Maine, you're likely to pass a place where you could find a sugar maker who's busy this time of year. But this is the harvest season. What's going to happen after the harvest season besides selling maple syrup? Fast forward to next fall. How are you tending the trees or the lines, or what sort of other procedures are part of your seasonal work? Marie, go ahead.
Right after the sugar season's done, the first thing we start doing is pulling our taps. We try to have all our taps out no later than June, so the tree can start its healing process. And then after that is cleaning up anything that's left out in the woods from down trees, stuff like that. It's always maintenance. If you're not building, you're maintaining. And it's really important to have a really good system so that you are able to collect everything that you really can.
So do you keep a checklist, Marie?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we are. We will keep tabs of temperatures, everything from that day that happened, so that we kind of can go back and say, all right, we find a tap in late June. I'm like, all right, guys, whose is this field? I keep track of all of it, so I know. Because for us, it's real important to get those taps out and let the tree start its healing process. They're our livelihood. We got to take care of them.
Yeah. How about you, Ben? What's the process look like for you once the syrup production is complete? What else happens the rest of the year?
Well, unfortunately, I have to go back to my regular job. So that's the hard part about it. I'd like to think I could take a real long nap, but that doesn't usually happen. But in between going back to regular work and everything else, our goal is to get everything flushed up through the pipe, get our evaporator broken down, and then then really we start planning for Freiburg Fair. We have a spot on Expo 5 at Freiburg Fair that sells syrup in October. So that's kind of like the beginning of the next phase of maple selling. So,
Excellent. How about you, Michael? What does it look like for you after the annual production and process has happened?
Well, once taps are out of the tree, and as Ray said, we do that very quickly. Getting everything cleaned up is important, and then from there, rebuilding in the sugar bush, things that need to be done. We just bought a plot of land and have been reworking that and turned it into a sugar bush the last 2 years. So that's pretty much taken all of our spare time to pull that off, and looking at a whole nother section in the future here. And so it's just expanding and adding and fixing and maintaining. Time. Then there's the whole sales piece comes into play, and especially in the fall. By September, we're really gearing up for Christmas orders, and it becomes insane around here, the shipping piece of it. So that is just big in the fall.
What does it take to ship a standard gallon of maple syrup? I mean, that seems like quite the feat to pull off. Are you shipping a gallon, or maybe you have packages of other products?
We have both. I mean, we get people ordering gallons all the time, and they go into we double box everything, and that's really the key to survival. The gallon gets padded into one box, and then that box goes into a whole other box, and with the padding around that, and then shipped all over the country every day. So once in a while we have a sticky mess to deal with, but for the most part, the things arrive nicely, and we're in good shape. So
busy. So Louis and Andrea, what is your seasonal task looks like when you're done with the boil?
Pretty much the same as everybody else. Just pulling taps, breaking down, starting to sterilize lines, even individual taps, I sterilize them. My evaporator, I mean, it's an expensive piece of equipment. So, I mean, that's like one of the first things when I'm done. I mean, that's washed out, sterilized, acid washed, and it's ready to go for next year. That's probably one, that's when the work begins, is after the season.
It's a good way to describe it. Proper prior planning.
Yeah.
So I do have a couple questions that people submitted before this broadcast started, and I'd like to take a moment and ask them for each of you. So the biggest question, and we've kind of talked about this, it could be easy to intuit or think about, but if you have a maple tree and you plant it, say I plant it this springtime is coming, and there's two parts to this. How big does the tree need to be before I can tap it? Or if I planted a baby maple tree, could I tap it next spring? Louis, I think we talked about this before. What's the answer to that?
No, you're not going to tap it next spring. Probably in about 30 springs or more, maybe 40 springs.
45.
And there's a few recommendations if you read what a diameter of a tree. I've read somewhere between 9 inches, 12 inches. Some of the more experienced guys may be able to help you out better with that. I just go by if the tree looks healthy enough to sustain it. That's kind of how I judge it.
Yeah. Kurt, you manage quite a large sugar bush. What's your take on that?
Well, I agree with Lewis there. You're going to be looking at a good 40 years before you're going to get any sap out of that tree, before you even dare tap it. And then as far as diameter goes, up our neck of the woods and our organic certification and then the landowners that we're leasing taps from, minimum we can possibly go is 10 inches, and then only if the tree is very, very healthy. But most of our trees are a good 12 inches in diameter or up. And by diameter, we mean, straight across. We throw a tape around it. We're not measuring the circumference. So all the way around the tree, we're measuring straight across.
So there's, everyone has thrown out some words that we all know and learn about. We talked about, basically it's come down to math, science, biology, chemistry. There's a pretty scientific process to making pure Maine maple syrup. Michael, I know you're an educator as well. Is this something that we should be incorporating into our curriculum, a system of learning based on managing a sugar bush? There's so much to it.
I certainly, there is some of that being done now in public schools, and I think more of it is great. Any times you can give kids a hand-on application, they can remember it more, and they're going to be more useful later on in life in the workforce and whatnot. So it's a great idea, and there is just so much science involved with sugaring that I would have no problem building a science curriculum around maple syrup, and I wouldn't be the first one to do it. There's plenty out there that have got tried and true curriculums, so it's a great idea.
Yeah. So are there any particular equations? We've talked about some important numbers when we're thinking about age of a tree, diameter. Now, we've also talked about some science which you might be integrating into your cleaning systems, which maybe people don't always understand that. But if anybody's ever worked in food production, I think it's important to discuss that. And Marie, is that part of your checklist, the cleaning and maintenance side of things? What sort of care is going into that from a food preparation perspective?
For our sugar house, we are also organically certified. At the end of the season, we run water through our lines as we're pulling taps to help clear them, change out lines that may look bad. Same thing, acid wash our machines. For our bottling end of it, which we also have certified organic, a lot of it is just cleaning. It's not waiting. Get it done then when everything is hot and easy to clean off, because we cannot use chemicals. And not only that, maple syrup is such a delicate flavor that anything that you're going to put in there is going to pick up that flavor. So for us, the cleanliness and the hot water, as hot as you can get it, is the best thing, to keep our syrup crisp and clean, and the flavor, true flavor.
Yeah. What is that hot temperature? Like you say, the hottest you can get it. What's the hottest you can get it?
For our regular heater, we have 140 when we're steaming all of our, and I'm talking my bottling room, because our evaporators will get really, really hot. You can make taffy in them if you're not careful. I don't want to say I've done that, but you rely on your temperature gauges, and sometimes they fail. But in our bottling room, we run everything at 140. We steam all our equipment so that everything is at least 220, so that everything is steam cleaned. And that way, like I said, it just makes for a cleaner, crisper tasting syrup. Great. So we try to keep at least 220 for when we're steaming everything.
So pretty hot.
When we bottle syrup, and the rest will tell you, we hold our syrup at 185 for 5 minutes to make sure that there's no bacteria is ever going to survive. And most of them will tell you, believe it or not, nobody really touches that from sap to syrup. There's nobody touching it. Mm-hmm. It's all done by moving it around with pumps. And even when we're bottling, nobody's touching it. It's one of, I thought was one of the neatest things when we started doing this, when I realized no hands have touched it because of the way we're processing everything. So
A lot of care and
a
detail.
lot of care. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important for people to, and I see we just have a comment from a listener who is appreciative of the syrup being shipped from Maine, and a New Yorker who actually is shipping Maine maple syrup. So thank you for that. So I think one thing that is fascinating to maple syrup as well includes this idea that it's a product that you take sap and you take out a lot of the moisture, and there's really not a lot of processing involved at all, if any. So what really makes, tell me about what makes pure Maine maple syrup. Michael, go ahead.
What makes pure Maine maple syrup?
Versus a corn syrup, let's say.
Well, obviously, we're dealing with a pure product here, and the sugars are very different. If you look at the sugars inside maple syrup, you've got glucose, fructose, and sucrose, but it's a very high percentage of the sucrose that you have there, much higher than anything else. Most of the pancake syrups you got are going to be very high fructose with their sugars, which are just not nearly as good for you. So you've got a product with much better sugars in it, and you've also got a product that also has just a boatload of minerals in it too: zinc, manganese, potassium, iron. So it's just a much healthier sugar for you, and just much better for your body in all. So.
And there is actually a way that you can take syrup and almost have a granulated sugar. Louis and Andrea, I think you might have a product that you display for your end products, for your farm products. Have you worked with that before in terms of maple syrup's a great liquid item, but a lot of different ways that you can use maple syrup. So Louis and Andrea, tell us a little bit more about what you're offering for your products.
Well, I think most sugar makers, they offer sugar granulated, and essentially you just boil syrup long enough there's no water left in it. That's it. And if you ever get a chance to do it, it's one of the most fascinating science experiments there ever was, because when that turns to sugar, it's sugar. And it's great to do with the kids and let them see that. And well, I don't know. I lost my thought, I guess.
You've been busy all day because you're actually, for those of our listeners who are watching us live and the recording, which will be on realmaine.com, Louis is actually in his sugar house, and he's been, like he said earlier, he's been boiling all day. So busy. And it's okay to lose your train of thought because you've been focused and working hard on peak production right now. Ben joining us again. We were just discussing different products that people can enjoy and might like to taste or favorite items. I know that you have made some maple candies and also some cotton candy. So probably a pretty big hit when it comes to what people like to enjoy.
We actually one of our big sellers is maple cotton. What Bristol does it really kind of beats the red and yellow and green stuff, and people are more apt to try that. And we do make maple candy here. We don't coat it for a shelf life. Basically, it's grab and go. We make it that day, and prior to the pandemic, big jar and take it out with a pair of tongs, put in a piece of wax paper, and it wouldn't even make people's cars. Now we're probably going to have to change that around and create packaging.
But still a favorite.
We on Maple Sunday again we would make a homemade ice cream and give it out for guests here. Maple syrup on a crock pot with warm syrup, and we froze our own ice cream. My grandmother, she was the lunch lady for 20 years. She came up with a recipe for ice cream that was basically more like a custard. We would cook the custard on the stove, and then we have a 3-gallon ice cream freeze ice cream. So that was kind of our calling card to get people, some people show up. They want homemade. It's totally different than regular store bought.
Okay.
So it's good to have maple syrup and maple products on a lot of different things. I think people associate springtime and maple syrup, but one of my favorite ways to enjoy maple syrup as a natural sweetener is maybe in hot cocoa or in tea. I've heard people add it to coffee. And if I've ever indulged myself, they make little beignets at some food shows, and they have maple cream. So I think Michael, or maybe it was Kurt, one of you had mentioned maple cream is a pretty popular product. What makes that different than maple syrup? Michael?
Well, the maple cream is boiled quite a bit more, so you remove more of the water, but not all of it. And then you're cooling it rapidly, so the sugar is crystallized totally differently. And once you've cooled it, then you're stirring it up, and it becomes the consistency of a peanut butter. And it is still a pure maple product, but it looks very much like peanut butter with that dull brown coating to it. And my twins, Thomas and Julia, just absolutely love slathering that all over their breakfast in the morning, and it's good stuff.
It's good stuff. I agree. Now, Kurt, you do a lot of different types of maple products as well. Tell us a little bit about some of those.
Well, like everybody else does, we do maple sugar as well, and but we go a little bit further with ours, and we make a maple rub, or like a maple black pepper, or maple cinnamon sugar, which is really good. You gotta try that on fried bread dough. That's like a winner right there. And I gotta go with Ben. That cotton candy is just to die for. It is so good, and it's always a big hit whenever we do a show and we've got fresh cotton candy there. And then we use it in a lot of other things too, like we can make a maple granola. We also make a maple hot cocoa mix, and that's just so good. But yeah, maple's got a lot of other uses.
That's great. Louis and Andrea, do you find any ways to use maple syrup that you particularly enjoy yourself or from your customers?
I cook with it quite a bit. We make maple fudge. I make a maple glazed ham. The other night I made a mustard maple chicken, and one of the kids said it was their favorite meal ever. We put it in our beef jerky seasoning that we make. Yeah, I mean, any recipe that calls for honey or sugar, you can replace it with maple syrup.
What is the ratio for that, Andrea? Do you know what the ratio is for replacing like cane sugar with maple syrup?
Yeah, if there's another liquid in your recipe, you have to decrease that by so much. I'm not sure the exact ratio.
We can always post that for people.
I believe it's a third.
A third, says Ben. Marie says a third. Sometimes you just guess, I guess, anyway. Right? Well, we're just about out of time for this episode, but I'd really like to go back around to our sugar makers and not to take you too far off the the track for your primary objective this season, which is to get that sap harvested and make pure Maine maple syrup. But Maine maple syrup is a really special product, and you all have described the amount of effort that it takes. You've helped us understand that it's not without effort. It takes a lot of detail, paying attention to detail in the maple syrup sales side of things, and also taking care of those trees and keeping everything clean and in top shape, troubleshooting on the go, being prepared to troubleshoot as needed, never a dull moment. But I think that's important for our listeners to hear. And I guess I'd like to close out if we could go around and just remind our listeners why it matters to support Maine agriculture and how they can do that year round. So Kurt, we'll start with you.
Well, it's important to support all those small maple producers and other farms around the state of Maine. I mean, you're supporting small family farms. I mean, ours here, we're supporting, it supports my parents, supports my brother and his wife, supports me and my wife and our 2 kids. It's, it matters to us a lot. And, and you get a really sweet product out of the deal. And, it kind of helps the whole economy,
Thanks, Kurt. Ben, go ahead and give your insight on why it matters.
Well, I guess I would leave your viewers with this thought is that is with myself and Mike and everybody else that's on here, there's a lot of focus on family. And if you ever have any incline of being in the maple business, you want to make sure your family subscribe to that, because if you're the only one that's going around and collecting buckets and you don't have any help with that, it gets old quick. So my thought process is that if I was going to buy a product from somebody, would rather it come from somebody that has a family that support, that lives locally. Anybody can buy maple syrup anywhere. And what I would suggest people is that they develop a relationship with their sugar maker. It's really important as far as the industry goes here in Maine to keep that flowing, because otherwise nobody prospers. It's great that we're able to ship stuff. We ship a lot of stuff out of state, but we never get to see them. And one of the things that we like to do is develop a relationship with our customers. And it was very true showing this past Maple Sunday, when a lot of the local folks just still came out and supported us. We didn't have the same events, but we had a table out in the driveway, and the same faces that come every year came and supported us. And I don't know what you put for a value on that. Just
Priceless.
a lot. Yeah, really, it is. I can't say enough to develop a relationship with your sugar maker, because they'll definitely take care of you.
Great. Louis and Andrea, go ahead and give your thoughts about why it matters to support maple producers and Maine agriculture.
Well, like everybody said, I mean, it's very important to support a local business. You're helping out everybody. I mean, when you do that, you're also buying a product that's renewable, and it's natural. And then the other part of that is too, it's the future of our children. I mean, if we don't have a food source of any kind, then where are we going to be at? So, yeah, I mean, you've got to support your local farmers no matter what they are.
Thanks. Michael, your thoughts on the value of supporting Maine agriculture?
Well, we've heard lots about family today, and I will certainly just add to that. It was raining out this afternoon here as we were out gathering sap, and I had had the family in the truck, and they were out there working. They weren't complaining a bit. My wife and daughter are back here running the store. My other brother's downstairs boiling right now. It's just a whole family enterprise that works together. And, there's that Bible verse that says, train up a child in the way he should grow, and he's old, he will not depart. And boy, my kids are learning a work ethic. They're learning how to make an awesome product, and they're doing well in school because of it. It all ties together. So we very much appreciate everyone's support of local farms, and it's just a wonderful thing that all of us have, and the families that support us.
Thanks, Michael. Marie, go ahead and offer your insight on the value of supporting Maine agriculture.
For me, it's, very similar to what everyone else has said. It supports small businesses, and Maine has a lot of small businesses. The other part of that is it ensures a fresh product, lessening our carbon footprint on shipping, on trucking in products. For me personally, it's, for my people, we have always used the sap from the muckwan, from the tree. So for us, it's going back to who we are and taking a product that my people have always used and taking it to market.
Thank you all. This has been such a great kickoff to this series where we're getting a chance to hear directly from farmers, growers, and producers of Maine farm products. And I want to encourage all of our listeners to find more farmers and growers and producers on realmaine.com. All of our presenters or interviewees tonight do have a presence either on social media or a website, so you can reach out directly. We're happy to continue to track your questions and comments even when we go off air, and I can attest this is a great group of producers, and we have approximately 500 licensed maple producers across Maine. So it's a great time to remember that March, February, April, those are our sap harvest seasons, but you can enjoy pure Maine maple syrup year round. Thank you, everyone.
Well, everyone.